I want to talk to you today about scaling. And before we get started, right, let's just look at what we might be running into, what you might be running into. It's what I see other people run into. When we're thinking about scaling the most often is when we're feeling a little stuck, maybe stagnant. We've landed contracts. We've been in business 3, 4, 5 years or something, maybe even 10 years, but we're kind of at this stagnant level. We're not popping out of wherever we're at. So that might be 3 or 4 million, right? You've landed initial contracts. You've had relationships, maybe 1 or 2 organic growths or an 8A program participation has helped you move forward a little bit, but then you're not moving forward. That might be one area where you're at. The other is you might have done a lot of things. I've got a customer who's done everything right in their growth, and now they're saying, okay, let's have a strategic plan for going. So they're not really stuck. They just want to pause for 1 second and create a solid plan to say, how do we go from this stage, let's say 5 million to 10 million, right? How do we go to that next stage? And I don't mean when I talk about scaling necessarily in a time box, a year. It could happen. Things could happen in a year. But you might also look out 5 years and go, hey, I want to scale in the next 5 years to a $100 million firm. Well, how are you going to do that? And so, if that's you, if that's where you're at, then you're in the right training, because that's who I want to address is how do you kind of kickstart yourself to the next set of goals. And so let's talk for a second about what I mean when I say scaling. And for today's training, I'm just going to focus on professional services, IT services, et cetera. I'm not necessarily focusing on construction or manufacturing, product sales, even though a lot of what I say will be valuable. The money you make in some of the scenarios are a little different for you than it is for professional services, certainly on the profit margin or the high dollar values, for example. I mean, I'll give you a quick little story. Until I started doing the GovCon chamber, I didn't even really pay attention to simplified acquisition, because from the minute I became a government contractor, I was looking at 1 million plus contracts. It was just what I was taught. It was where I was going. And it never even occurred to me that simplified acquisition was there. Obviously, it's a great process for people who are getting started. But for many of you, most of the purchases happen at that level. So it's a completely strategic approach for you. But so when I talk about professional services, I am coming at this from my own experience of being a small business owner in the IT space within the federal government. So scaling to me, when you think about this from the dollars, I'm going to talk about it scaling from a couple different angles. But the first thing is when you think about it from the dollars, what does that really mean? Well, first off, when I talk about money, I talk about something I call revenue recognized. I know there's all sorts of fancy accounting terms and CPA terms, CFO terms that are used, but I like revenue recognized, meaning I got it. And what I really mean is money in the bank, right? And I'll talk about this more in a minute, but that's what I mean, right? Money in the bank. I'm a for-profit business, right? If I'm a government contractor, I'm not apologizing for wanting to make money. That's my job, is to make money. So I take care of my family. So I can take care of my employees and their families. So all of us can take care of our community through the secondary spending that goes on when we go to a movie theater or pizza parlor and they need to hire somebody. So making money is good for the country. And I'm not going to apologize for that side. And when I talk about scaling up and where you want to go, I'm talking about money in the bank, right? How do you go from 5 million to 10 million? And so let me give you 5 or 6 levels that I look at when I think about scaling. First level is if you're making no money, I go from 0 to 200,000. Like that's my first scaling. You want to try to get there as fast as you can, but if you did that in 12 months, that's fine. Because now you're bringing in a good amount of revenue for your company that gives you the base to grow it. The next level is 200,000 to $1 million, right? That's 400 or 500 times, 500% growth, whatever that is. But it's so doable, right? Because in the professional services, it just means 2 or 3 more people working on your projects. But going from 200 to $1 million is a good stage, because at that point, to me, it potentially puts you in the position of not having to be billable or working in your customers' businesses and instead working on yours. The next scalable level is 1 to 2 million. And right after that is 2 to 4 million, right? And at these points, we're doubling 100%. So going from 2 to 4 million, when you start going to that stage, you're going to have more money that allows you to start maturing your organization, hiring in people who are more senior who can help you run the company. And then this last stage I want to talk about as it relates to today's training is going from 4 to 10 million, right? Maybe you can make that happen in a 12-month cycle. By the end of 2023, you can go from 4 to 10, but it's totally acceptable to give yourself a 2 or even 3 year window to get to that. But having that plan and knowing what does it take to go from 4 to 10 million, that's where I really play at. Those are the customers I want to work with one-on-one the most, because I can help them the most, right? For a lot of companies going 0 to 200,000, these daily trainings should be enough. Okay, so if you understand what I'm talking about from the scaling on a dollar level, put money in the bank into the chat. Let me know you're tracking on that. So I want to give you 6 thoughts or ideas for doing a gap analysis around scaling. I just call it a scaling gap analysis, right? And what this really means is you need to look at where you're at, determine where you want to go, and then see what's missing, what's needed, right? And so from a gap analysis, when you're getting started, that's all a gap analysis is. If you haven't done these before, where am I? Where do I want to go? And what is the delta? What's in between? What do I need to do to get to where I want to go? The next one is knowing your money. And so again, I like to simplify the way I talk about money in particular. And for money, it comes down to just 3 numbers, right? How much money came in, revenue, how much money went out, cost, and how much remains, profit, right? I don't try to get fancy with my numbers. I don't try to say top line and bottom line and all these different things, right? I just mean how much money came into my bank account, how much went out, and how much is left as profit. These 3 numbers are vital to me, because knowing how much came in is my revenue. It lets me understand where I'm at as it relates to my planning for what I want to achieve for scaling. So you remember, like 4 to 10 million. If I got 1.5 million coming in, 10 million might be too big for a scale target. And maybe I'm going to 4 million, 5 million or something. So knowing how much came in is obviously really important, right? And it helps, again, in a second when I talk about planning. The next thing is how much went out. Well, this is your cost, right? And it's this cost, by the way, to me includes my salary. So if I'm paying myself $200,000, $400,000 a year, which is totally fine. If you're the owner of the company and you're making a lot of money for the company, you should be getting yourself a good paycheck now, not waiting later to get paid. That's a whole nother training. But so this cost is inclusive of every single dime the company spits out, and whatever's left is your profit. You want a profit margin. I like 20%. That's a good steady margin in the government. The margin numbers are all around for every company out there. But knowing those numbers, that from the gap analysis, will help you as you start planning out around these numbers. So that's a step there. Know your money. The next one is, I want you to understand these 3 terms about planned, forecast, and actual. And the reason I like them, I use them as a project manager for the last 20 years around a lot of our activity, around a lot of the spending, et cetera. But planned is, so if I look at 1 year, 2023, for example, and I say in 2023, my plan is to make $12 million revenue, right? Money coming in, $12 million in 2023 over 12 months. My forecasted is 6 million. And what forecast means is, at this point, I can already forecast out that I'm going to get 6 million more. And that's because I have existing contracts that if the option years are extended, then I'll be able to continue bringing that money in. So I'm pretty positive I'm going to get 6 million, but it's a forecast. It's not a for sure thing. It's not actual, because until the government signs the paper, until they work with you, it's not actual. It's just forecasted. But by knowing that forecasted number of 6 million, and I have a planned goal of 12, then I realize that I have a delta of 6 million. Okay, I need new revenue sales of 6 million for 2023 to hit that $12 million goal. And then actual is whatever comes in. The reason I like these 3 numbers is because as you go along in 2023, the plan never changes. The forecast will change with reality every week when you have a leadership meeting or whatever, and you look at your numbers, and you might forecast it based on a new award, based on new information from the government about how much they're spending on a contract, et cetera. And so you adjust the forecast, which adjusts your activity. But when you have a 12-month goal, a 1 year goal of 12 million, you can break that into monthly goals of 1 million. And the reason that's important is every month, what I am saying is I should be bringing in $1 million. I don't have to wait till the end of 2023 to see if I hit my goals. Right. And so here, by having plan, forecast, and an actual, or plan, forecast, most importantly, I'm able to sit there and create measurements that I can track on a monthly basis and not push the decision down the line about whether I'm doing the right things or the wrong things. Hopefully that's making sense where you're at. This all goes together with a training I did earlier this week. And I actually have done multiple of these, but around a strategic plan. So go create a strategic plan for yourself. When you're doing a scaling gap analysis, you need to know who you're selling to, what you're selling, and how you're selling it. And so when I say how, I mean through prime contracts, through subcontracts, teaming with these type of companies. Having that strategic plan in place will help you be able to identify that gap. Here's what we're saying is needed to reach that 12 million, let's say. Here's what we need to do in order to get those things in place. Okay, so the next one is, I want you to look at the 7-step process, right? I've got a graphic right here. Let me find it really quick. So this graphic here, it's the 7-step process for federal revenue success. And the part that's really important that I want you to track on is proposals, opportunities, and relationships. If you don't have relationships, you won't really hear about great opportunities, and you won't be able to write winning proposals and start winning contracts. And this goes to the tip that I have for you on when you're scaling, doing a scaling gap analysis, is look at that 7-step process and go, where are we on this? Are we writing enough proposals? Do we have enough opportunities? Do we have enough relationships in place with teaming partners so that we can get subcontracting dollars? So one of your scaling gap analysis steps is to measure yourself against this 7-step process, and that'll give you the feedback you need to create action items, et cetera. And so that goes totally with the last step I was going to talk to you about here is reverse engineering your numbers. And what I mean by this is that if I say, let's say my revenue target next year is, my new revenue target is $5 million. I want to get $5 million in. And I'm going to keep this really simple. There's all sorts of details. I could go into this, but basically I want $5 million recognized revenue by the end of next year. In order to get to that point, I need $25 million in contract award. And I say this very loosely, right? Because I'm talking about professional services. We typically get 5-year contracts, which is awesome. If you don't, you have to modify your forecast. But $25 million contract award will generally generate $5 million a year on a 5-year contract, right? Makes sense? Simple math. And so I know that I need to make sure I'm proposing $100 million. When I submit proposals, the value needs to be $100 million. And the reason I say that is because, now stick with the math, if I want to win contract values up to $25 million, I win 1 out of every 4 proposals I submit. That's just a basic number I use percentage-wise. If I win 1 out of every 4, in order for me to get 25 million, I need to submit 100 million, right? 4 times. Other detail I share about how many proposals you actually should be submitting, what criteria you have in place. But all of it is pretty straightforward, that if you want 5 million and it's a 5-year contract typically, then you need to win $25 million in contract awards, which will then determine that you must have $100 million proposals going out the door in order to bring in that money. And then the last one is looking at, right, if you reverse engineer your numbers, in order to submit those proposals, let's say 1 out of 2 opportunities you have in the pipeline will have a proposal that goes out, then you need to have $200 million in your pipeline. And these must be slam dunk opportunities. If this is your first time here listening to me, slam dunk opportunities are the ones that are your core competency, that you could win every single day because you were the very best at it. There might be another company that's the very best, and that's fine. That's competition. That's why you win 1 out of every 4, let's say. But what you don't want to do is, if you're good at talking, you don't want to submit a proposal for writing. I just try to use two quick examples, right? Don't write to cloud if you're a cybersecurity company. Only write to cyber and you will win a predictable amount. So anyways, a lot of different suggestions I put in there on the scaling gap analysis and what might be in there. I haven't done a handout for this yet. If you guys have been here a long time with me, then you know I like to do handouts, but I'm just like pretty overwhelmed at the moment with things. But if you'd like this, I can try to like just throw it together in something and get it out as a basic handout. But what are those steps I just said? So you'll see them in writing. When you see them in writing, it might make more sense, or just at least refresh your memory. Okay, so the last portion I want to go into is, as you look to scale your business, I talk about what systems can you put in place, what things can you start doing to scale your business. So one of the most important things you're going to do when you're scaling your business and you're thinking about scaling your business is you got to plan, right? You got to look around it and plan everything I just said. But the next thing is you've got to be busy. And so you've got to have regular activities you're doing. And I want to give you 4 or 5 activities that you can be doing right now that will start helping you achieve the scale that you want to go to, achieve the destination or the goals you're setting for yourself. The first thing, though, before I even tell you those tips, is you cannot tolerate missing KPIs. And what I mean by KPIs, those are key performance indicators. These are things that you determine that I must have done in order to achieve success. And so if I want to get in shape and go exercise by running, then one of my key performance indicators is, did I put my tennis shoes on? Have I bought tennis shoes? If I haven't bought tennis shoes, then how am I going jogging? And yes, yes, I could jog barefoot or something, but really, I mean, if you look at the process, if you're not doing enough of these little things, if I'm not eating enough salads, how am I going to get healthy? And in the government space, there's really good stuff that we can measure ourselves on daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And that's what I want you to think about. I'm going to share some with you that I hope you take away. So the first one is daily. I'm a big fan of creating a time block. I think I might have even said this yesterday in the training. A time block, an hour, 2 hours, where your head's down on business development activities and business development engagements. And what this means is for 30 or 60 minutes, you're engaging with your teammates. Even if you talk about an opportunity, that's fine. But business development fundamentally is around relationships, understanding the teammate or the customer, and identifying opportunities. So anything around that is engagements. So I've done other training where I talk about many different ways you can do an engagement, but I'll give you an example. You could spend 15 or 30 minutes a day on LinkedIn, finding new people at the Department of Education that you can follow or learn from, beginning to engage with their comments, content, give it a thumbs up, give it a comment, things like that. Other activities you can do on a daily basis is phone calls, outreach, right? Every day you should give yourself a number, and I don't care what the number is, 1 person, 5 people, 10 people a day that you're going to, new people that you're going to reach out to and say, hey, I'm just trying to reach out. We're in this space. I'd love to talk with you, do a brief introduction meeting. You want to set a number that you will never, ever miss, right? That's why I'm saying if you do 2 a day and there's 260 business days in a year, then that's 500 plus people you have just reached out to because it's 2 new people every single day. 500 people. Imagine if you focused all those 500 people down into one organization like Boeing or Department of Navy, right? Both of those organizations have tens of thousands of people. And so you can find 500 people that relate exactly to cybersecurity or exactly to capture business development, things like that. People you would want to reach out to that might want to hear from you. So have a daily set of activity you're going to do. And what I call it is just 5 business development engagements every single day is a good measurement. I do 5 a day kind of thing, and you're good to go. So you want to have that measurement. And every single day, if you do it, you will feel a progress weekly. And so as we move into the weekly, yes, you want to be measuring the overall activity. I talk about it in different training where I say, how can you measure daily activity in a point system? And I might do that training again soon. But on a weekly basis, you look back at your daily activity and say, did we earn the points we were looking for? And you get points for business development, outreach, or engagement activity. But the thing I really want you to track on a weekly basis, as you want to, if you want to scale to the next level, right? You can't just sit back and hope. And so on a weekly basis, you need to measure your pipeline progress every single week. You need to see movement in the pipeline. And so, and fundamentally, we're talking about mostly things that are the next 12 months, right? Things that are 12 months and beyond, you should still be tracking on them. But that's a whole different way of doing capture, right? It's longer term, so you got a little bit more room and you don't have to do everything every week there. But if it's within 12 months, you should be doing something every single week that's measurable. Sometimes you might say, you know what, I'm going to take 3 weeks off, and you just put a note in and say, I'm coming back. That's fine if you strategically or determined to push it off 3 weeks. But for the rest of the things in your pipeline, they must have activity. I reached out to the contracting officer or the contracting specialist. I tried to find a teammate. I tried to understand the challenges more by meeting with the program office. I downloaded a PDF and I read it to learn more about the customer's missions, goals, and objectives, things like that. Whatever it is, I don't care what the movement is, but you must be able to legitimately tell yourself, hey, that opportunity in our pipeline moved forward. And if you only have slam dunk opportunities in your pipeline, opportunities that right to your core competency, then that means you won't have a ton of opportunities in your pipeline. You should not have hundreds of opportunities in your pipeline. You should have a very measured amount, 10, 20, right? You can do something every single week on those. If you can't, then there's a good chance that opportunity doesn't belong in your pipeline because you're not working it in capture, which means when you get to proposal, you're just kind of writing to it. Even if it's been in your pipeline, you're still basically just writing to it when the RFP drops. So weekly, measure the pipeline movement. This is about capture activity and measuring it. Monthly and quarterly, it's going to be kind of the same thing I want you to measure, but they measure at different levels. Every month, you should be submitting a proposal. And so you want to track monthly, have we submitted our proposals? Part of your gap analysis, your scaling gap analysis, when I talk about reverse engineering the numbers, is how many proposals do we need to submit every month in order to submit enough in a year to achieve the goals that we want? That's a number that is so very doable to determine, right? And so monthly, you want to measure yourself against it. If we said we need to submit 2 proposals a month, and I don't care if you're submitting 10 or 20, I actually don't think that's a good idea because now you're just scattershot. But if you're submitting slam dunk proposals, you could do 4 a month. I talk about how any company doing at least $1 million or more can do 4 a month. And the way you do that is 1 prime is going out the door and 3 subs. So get on 3 teams where you're part of a team and you're writing to your core competency and that's it. And it's not a lot of work. And then 1 prime. Whatever your number though is, measure it monthly because every single month you will be able to see whether you're making progress. And the same thing quarterly. Every quarter you can see if we were supposed to submit 12 proposals by now and we haven't, then there's no way we're hitting our goals. Let's stop pretending like we care about our goals. Because if we cared about our goals, we would be doing the activity that we need to do to achieve it. Okay, I got 1 minute left on one. Oh, by the way, so if you understand what I'm talking there about regular activities, et cetera, hit my goals in the into the chat there. Let me know you're tracking on that. And I want to give you last 2 things that these are so important to me for you to remember as you're scaling and just as we do our day-to-day job. So scaling, first thing, just a tip I'd say on cost is eliminate or outsource everything that's not core competency. This is a strong personal belief I have. For example, you should not be managing your IT services within your company. There's whole companies that are in this community probably that do IT services for a fee every month, $100 per user per month, and will keep your IT up and running. Perfect. Don't hire an internal IT person, hire an internal cloud person who can serve your customers. Same thing with finance, HR, all those things to me are kind of the same thing. They can be outsourced. You are outsourcing to the government your core competency. Really consider looking to other people to outsource that same things that are not your core competency, including most of your finance, right? Those are just numbers. You can have your leadership do strategy thinking, and a good CPA firm can advise you without the cost of $200,000-$300,000 salaries. I've spent a lot of money on senior people and have learned this mistake. And then time after time, when I talk to other businesses, that's one of our chief ones. And so the last thing I want to leave you with is no excuses. Don't ever make any excuses for what you're trying to achieve. If you want to scale, you must commit to getting things done without excuses. An example of an excuse that I hear is the RFP has slipped. The RFP can't keep slipping. What can we do? The government slips. What you can do is find more opportunities that are in your pipeline that are slam dunks. What you want to happen is you have to reject a proposal. You say, we can't do this. Even though we could win it, it's the best thing ever. The problem is we got 3 other proposals and I can only do 2. We can only do 2. You want to be at that stage. Don't be at the mercy of the government and their shifting dates. Make sure there's enough in your pipeline. And then everything that you interact with, those daily activities, et cetera, no excuses, right? If you have no excuses, then you will scale your company or you will scale your part of the business to where you want to go. And that's really what I want you to do. I get pretty fired up about that. So anyways, if that makes sense, do me a favor, just throw in no excuses into the chat. That's a good place for me to just wrap that up. All right, so today we talked about how to scale your business. And I want to leave you with this one last thought. Just start by making sure you and your colleagues within your company all know where you're at and where you want to go, right? I talked about the beginning of a gap analysis, or what a gap analysis really is saying to ourselves, where are we? Where do we want to go? And then what's in between? Well, the first thing you can do today or Monday morning with your colleagues is say, hey, where are we? Where do we want to go? If you have that conversation, the stuff in between will take care of itself in the out weeks, but at least you guys have a solid understanding of where you want to go. If you found today's training valuable, do me a favor, put thanks in the chat. Gus and I always appreciate that. We love coming back afterwards and seeing the comments. I know some of you can't respond to my comments when I comment in there, but I love that we have this community, and I appreciate that you throw that thanks to us. I want you to remember one thing. Government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is having a great weekend. I'm going to try my hardest to make that start as close to now as possible. I'll see you in the next training.